letting us come into your home and conduct this interview.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Now, I understand you've got 3 books coming out, synchronicity-wise, on the same day almost.
Pretty much, yeah.
Tell us about all 3 of them.
Well, one of them's called Chupacabra Road Trip, which is published by Llewellyn Publications.
Okay.
And over about the last 11 or 12 years, I've been on a lot of expeditions to Puerto Rico looking for the Chupacabra, and also Mexico and around Texas and various parts of the US. So that book is like a diary road trip type presentation, if you like, of all the expeditions I've been on, the cases I've investigated, people I've interviewed, and so that it's sort of written in the way it happened, you know, sort of jumping on the plane and running around and driving.
Almost like a journey travelogue.
Yeah, like a travelogue type book, sort of X-Files meets Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Do you have a recipe chapter in there for roadkill chupacabra?
I ought to, actually. Particularly if you're stuck out in the rainforest or something like that, it would come in handy.
So what countries did you cover in that book?
Well, the US, Puerto Rico and Mexico. Now, Puerto Rico is where the original Chupacabra reports surfaced in the 1990s.
Wow. Then
in the 2000s we had the reports over here. But the creature that was known as, or still is known as, the Chupacabra on Puerto Rico is described as like walking on 2 legs with a row of spikes down its head and neck. Now the
almost
American,
like a wolf man.
Well, actually more like a creature from the Black Lagoon, but scaled down.
Okay.
But the ones in the US are more like a hairless coyote. Well, they actually are hairless coyotes.
Those are the pictures I've seen on the internet.
But the name Chupacabra has been applied to these American ones when it's actually 2 different phenomena that share the same name. So that's one of the things I point out in the book, is that you know, from the research, in my view, there are 2 different phenomena that have been given the same name.
Very interesting.
So we need to investigate them on their own merit. So that's what that book's about.
And that one's from Llewellyn Publishing.
That's Llewellyn.
Okay.
And then I've got one from Visible Ink Press called the Bigfoot book, and that's an A to Z of everything to do with Bigfoot. Like A for Abominable Snowman, Y for Yeti, B for Bigfoot, obviously. But it's also got entries on things like Bigfoot and food, UFO sightings at the same time as Bigfoot. You know, is Bigfoot an alien? Historical reports of Bigfoot, theories as to what they might be. But instead of being done in chapters, it's all A to Z entries. So it's about 400 pages and 200 entries.
And each letter would have something to do with the
I think
the story of the Bigfoot or his traits or something.
Yeah, I think every letter of the alphabet is actually covered, but there's probably something like 15 entries under A, 20 under B, 5 or 6 under Z, that kind of thing.
And that, the Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Yeti are all over the world. So these stories that you pulled together for that are international.
America, Canada, pretty much all of South America, Africa, Australia, they have their own version called the Yowie, the Yeren in China, Wildman reports in Europe. So it pretty much covers everything. So both of those are my biggest area of research, which is cryptozoology, the study of unknown animals. And so I enjoy going on expeditions and road trips. But as I said, although they're both cryptozoology, they're written very different. The Bigfoot one, I said, is A to Z. The Chupacabra one is like a diary, you know, it was a dark and stormy night and I jumped in the car, that kind of...
More personal.
Yeah.
Personal point of view.
Yeah.
And I guess both have lots of pictures.
Oh yeah, I always, whenever I go anywhere, I always make sure I get my own pictures, because I think it's important for the readers that if you're going to read a story, you want to be able to visualise in your mind what the place is like. So I've got pictures of some of the little towns and villages where I interviewed people, or the rainforests and the hills and the jungles, just to give people a sense of what Puerto Rico looks like.
Neat. And
also in the US and Mexico, you know, with the locations there and some of the people and that kind of thing.
You must have had interviews with some of the locals too.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been there to Puerto Rico many occasions now over the last 11 years, and you know, travel around, interviewed veterinarians, police officers, civil defence workers, ranchers, members of the public, all who've been able to provides some sort of input on whatever these creatures are.
Wow.
And so, you know, it's you get different opinions, and I haven't sort of been biased, which I wouldn't do anyway, but I haven't been biased in terms of presenting the different theories. You know, I'm not trying to push this theory or that theory.
Right.
I mean, for Puerto Rico, you've got everything along the lines from the people who live there. Some people think the Chupacabra are extraterrestrials, you know, some sort of creature that's been released or that now lives on the island.
Probably interdimensional too.
Well, you've got the interdimensional theory. Some people think it's like a creation of the military, like a hybridized mutant that's escaped, you know, something the military was going to release on the battlefield, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And then you have the occult theory. Some people think it's literally like a supernatural thing conjured up by, you know, like a supernatural ritual.
Does that include demons?
Yes, yeah.
Because I could see some people thinking it was straight from hell.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, there is a lot of occult activity on Puerto Rico, and animal sacrifice and things like that, so it's not surprising that theory surfaces. Now, in the US, with these hairless coyotes, you know, the skeptical approach or version is that they're just mangy coyotes, mange being a condition caused by a mite which makes the hair fall out, but generally it falls out in clumps. So, you know, they're not entirely hairless. It's like you would have a clump of hair there and there and there.
These just look like skin. I mean, it's just not even a stubble left, right?
Well, you're exactly right. And what happens also in mange, the animals get very irritated, so they're constantly scratching, and it causes irritation. Then it cuts the skin, and they get infections, and they often die.
Oh wow!
So if you see like a coyote with mange, it looks like it's on its last legs, because it might well be. But these hairless coyotes are developing in what looks like a completely 100% hairless fashion. Even the pups are the same.
Oh my goodness.
And they're not scratching, they're not itching, they're just hairless. They also have a difference in their jaw, where the top jaw is slightly longer than the bottom jaw by about an inch.
Like an overbite.
Like a larger overbite.
Wow.
Their front limbs are slightly smaller, so they have like a kangaroo sort of hopping movement. And one of the more popular theories is that it could be like a spontaneous mutation in the species, because one of the things that can't be explained with it just being hairless coyotes, why weren't we seeing these all over the place, say in 1995 or 1980? Why is it only now? One of the theories is it could be caused by what's called a mutagen. A mutagen is something that is often connected to like chemical plants and things like that. If you get into the water supply, a mutagen, like mercury is a mutagen. Mutagen can affect an animal at the DNA level and create spontaneous changes in the creature. So that may be what we've got going on with the Texas one.
I've got the perfect hypothesis. Chemtrails.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting
strontium,
one.
barium, aluminum. Some people say there's mercury there too.
Well, I mean, it could be. I mean, my personal view is that it is due to some sort of mutagen. So we're not dealing with an unknown animal, we're dealing with a mystery surrounding why a known animal is starting to mutate so drastically. And there's also a few interesting psychological issues going on with the creatures, where most coyotes keep away from people.
Right.
There are some cases on record where they've actually surrounded people in like a triangular type of situation, and they hunt during the day.
Oh my.
Which, you know, coyotes don't do that.
No.
So, in other words, it's not just physical changes, it's, like I said, in the mindset is changing as well.
It's like a cultural change for that species.
Yeah.
And why only coyotes? Why not frogs or squirrels?
Yeah. Well,
birds?
You know, I mean, we do sometimes find like hairless possums and things like that, and they do look odd. But I kind of put those into a different category, because those are probably just mangy possums. But then again, maybe they're being affected in a similar fashion. And one of the things that's been suggested, these mutagens could come from coal burning plants, and there actually are a lot of coal burning plants in Texas. And the one state where we get more of these animals than anywhere else is Texas. So, you know, there could be some sort of
What about,
time.
you said Mexico too?
Yeah,
do they have that down there as well?
Well, they do, and it's kind of interesting because we sort of get different scenarios where some people report the dog-like animals and others report the more traditional type from Puerto Rico, which they look very different.
Yeah,
as
they
I said,
sound different.
The Puerto Rican ones sort of, you imagine something say the size of a chimpanzee that can run on 2 limbs and 4, so like humanoid, but sort of 4 feet tall.
And kind of a razorback look.
Right, yeah, it's got like spikes down its head and neck, and has, some people have said it has like these red eyes, whether glowing or just self-illuminating, I don't know. Sharp talons, sharp fangs, claws.
And are they out in the daytime too?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of people have reported them with wings, as strange as it sounds.
Goodness.
But more like backlight wings, where you can see the membranes and the veins in them. Imagine a
obviously no
back.
hair.
No, none at all. No.
Not on the wings.
But they're not hairless like the hairless coyotes. It's more like a lizard or a reptile type skin, that kind of thing. So I think what's happened is that there's definitely two real phenomena, but through pop culture and folklore and the world of entertainment as well, any animal today that's sort of a little bit weird, people say must be a chupacabra,
Yeah.
But they're not all chupacabras. A case can be made that obviously that Puerto Rico was a chupacabra, and I don't mind that people call the Texas one the Texas chupacabra. The name's stuck; it's not going to go away.
Sure.
But when you're applying the same name to two different creatures, then
that could be very different.
Yeah, it becomes complicated.
Yeah.
So.
And Chupacabra means goat sucker.
Yeah.
And do both of these versions of the creature tend to be associated with draining animals of blood?
Well, that's a good question, because in Puerto Rico, there's no doubt that pretty much every time I've been there, every case we investigated, within a minute or so, I'll hear words like suck blood or drain blood. And it's a controversial angle, because we do find puncture wounds on the necks of the animals. The first time I went there in 2004, I investigated with a friend of mine, John Downs from England. We went to a particular farm. Now, I say a farm, they're not like our farms. Unfortunately, a lot of the people in Puerto Rico are very poor. So this man's farm was essentially like a pen in his backyard, just like 20 feet by 25 feet. That was it.
Like a dog kennel almost.
Yeah, and he had like a lot of chickens in these cages. He woke up one morning to find that all the chickens were dead with 2 puncture wounds, and actually a puncture wound on the stomach as well, near the liver, so that side. And now he thought that the blood had been drained. Now, one thing you have to be careful of when you're looking at dead animals and theories that the bloods are drained, when an animal dies, the blood through gravity just sort of gravitates to the bottom. So if you slice open the top part, there is going to be a distinct less amount of blood than there should be. When your heart's beating, your blood's pumping all around your body. And so it is a controversial angle as to whether the blood's being sucked, or some people talked about the liver being sucked out and things like that, or is the blood being just just lapped. I mean, a lot of people think the most famous example is a vampire bat. But vampire bats actually don't suck blood. What they do, they make 2 incisions and then they lap the blood. But they're extremely quick at lapping it. They can take in a massive, compared to their body weight, a massive amount of blood. It'd be like us drinking 10 pints of beer.
By licking it out of the top of the can.
Yeah, and they have like an anticoagulant that prevents the blood from clotting in the animal. They often attack Puerto Rico, they'll attack cows. Yeah, and so the blood keeps pouring. They keep drinking it.
Amazing.
And but as I said, they lap it. They don't. It's actually folklore, myth. Misconception that they suck it. Really, the only animal that literally kind of sucks blood is like a vampire in folklore.
Right. Or the current people who want to be vampires, and they actually try to do that.
Well, I try to, which I don't recommend.
No.
And now with the Texas ones, there's a bit of ambiguity, and I do have reports where people have said they saw these creatures lapping the blood, but this is also after attacking the animals, so it may just have been, they're eating some of the meat, and they're in a crazed state or whatever, they're lapping some of the blood. But the important thing to note is that although we don't have any bodies from the Puerto Rican creatures, we do have bodies from the Texas ones. They've been hit by cars or been shot by farmers. They've been autopsied, and their internal organs are just like regular coyotes. heart, liver, kidneys, the lot. So now with a vampire bat, their organs are extremely different because they have to be aligned or adapted to absorb blood. You know, we could not live by drinking a pint of blood.
Right.
You know, you just couldn't do it because our organs
the digestive system.
Yeah, the digestive system just isn't set up to do that. And there's absolutely nothing abnormal about the digestive systems of the Texas Chupacabra. They're absolutely normal. It's just the external body and the limbs that are different. So they're clearly not geared physically to drink blood. So I think the blood angle of the Texas one is probably
myth,
ambiguity to the point. I wouldn't say much myth. I think it's more just mistaken, you know, just genuine mistakes. People know it's got the name of the Chupacabra. They heard the Chupacabra is like the goat sucker. It drinks blood. So anything where there's blood spilled, the theory, you know, I can understand why people would say, oh, the blood spilled, that meant it was drinking the blood. It actually doesn't. So
I don't think I want to read either of those books on a dark, stormy night anywhere towards the end of October.
Yeah, well, keep it for the daytime.
I will. I'll get it in the summertime, and I'll read them in the bright sunlight. So what's the third book?
Well, the third book comes out by New Page Books, and it's called Bloodline of the Gods, and it deals with a subject that a lot of people have heard of, but equally a lot of people haven't heard of. And even those who have heard of it, it's really only ever been the subject of articles or a blog post here or there. And it's the issue of why a very small percentage of the human race has what's called Rh negative blood. Now, that in itself would be an anomaly, but there's a lot of accounts and history and stories that link people who are Rh negative with the UFO subject. So what I did was to sort of go back to the very beginning of the story and look at all the different aspects of Rh blood, negative and positive, and look at the UFO angles and determine, you know, is there a real story here or is it valid? And
like a connection.
Yeah, and I came away absolutely convinced that it is real. And you know, as I said, it's a very small percentage. I mean, we can debate. If I was to say 91% of people are Rh positive, I'd be lying. It's difficult, you know, with the number of births per day and deaths per day all across the world. But it's, you know, I would say 85, 86% to about 91%, thereabouts, on average, of the entire human race across, you know, African American, Caucasian, Asian, everything. You know, it's roughly sort of 85 to 91% is Rh positive. Now, Rh is taken from the rhesus monkey. You know, we can all be traced back to having what's called the Rh factor.
From rhesus?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if the theory of evolution is 100% correct, I'm not saying it isn't totally, I mean completely incorrect, but if it isn't totally correct, there's no logical reason why we shouldn't all be Rh positive.
Yeah.
You know, there's actually no.
How did it go missing?
Yeah. Why should a small percentage be Rh negative? That in itself is important. Now, there are various clusters around the world where the Rh negative percentage is higher than in others. One of them, for example, is in Finland. And you actually get it more in some of the Celtic countries and Celtic areas as well. But the most prevalent people alive today who are Rh negative are the Basque people who live in Spain predominantly and also France. Their level of Rh negatives is like 40% of their entire population. It may well have been much higher in centuries ago, but you know, of course, with the advancing technology and people moving away and, you know, travelling and cars and traffic, etc., well, you know, the bloodline kind of gets filtered down and diluted. So I'm pretty sure at one point it was way above 40. Now, the Basque people are almost like a race of their own.
Right.
And they have their own unique language, which actually isn't found anywhere else, anywhere in Europe. And it's been suggested that it's almost like an inherited ancient unique language from where we don't know.
And it doesn't appear to be derived from some other branch of the known languages.
No, it's actually that their words are so unique. It is literally its own language. Now, on top of that, there are the physical appearances of the Basque people. They have like a heavier brow, wider nose. The guys are like built muscular, not through just working out, but that's their natural build. And the areas where the Basques predominantly are found are also areas where tens of thousands of years ago Cro-Magnon man lived and roamed.
Okay.
And if you look at the photographs of the Basque people, you can clearly see they have this unique bone structure which actually does quite closely resemble certain characteristics and traits of Cro-Magnon man. And we also find that in areas of the planet where Cro-Magnon man proliferated up to sort of 30,000 years ago, Rh negative percentages proliferated as well. So the chances are, given all this with the locations, the proliferation, the Basque connection, almost certainly a high percentage of the Cro-Magnons were Rh negative.
Wow.
Now that sort of begs the question, well, why were they Rh negative when Neanderthal man, which existed at the same time, we don't see evidence of Neanderthal man being Rh negative, and Neanderthal man actually died out under circumstances that today scientists, archaeologists, historians cannot really agree on. They said, well, Cro-Magnon man sort of forced his way into their territory, but they were both robust fighters. There's no reason why one should have gone out at the expense of the other. They were both strong and advanced farmers. But for some reason the Neanderthals were wiped out, and this sort of brings us to one of the most controversial theories in relation to the whole Rh negative blood and the Cro-Magnon issue. Is what if Cro-Magnon man was a genetically altered human type, intentionally, deliberately, by extraterrestrials in the distant past? Now, of course, to a degree, we're forced to speculate, obviously, but one of the things I talk about in the book are the theories and the stories surrounding the legendary Anunnaki. You can go back in pretty much every culture and find stories of the gods or advanced beings coming down from the skies to help or teach, or sometimes almost like fascist style bully the human race to doing things their way rather than our way,
like slaves.
And you can find, you've got the Anunnaki, the stories of the giants coming down in the
fallen
angels. Native American lore talks of the gods coming down and things like this. South America, they have their gods. Egypt, everywhere has stories of higher entities. So although I predominantly focus on the stories of the Anunnaki in the book, you could apply the term Anunnaki under any other name to these higher entities perceived as gods in numerous cultures.
Not indigenous to this planet.
Not indigenous to this planet. And of course, again, a controversial theory for all this was put forward by Zecharia Sitchin, who did the Earth Chronicles books. The idea that there's this huge planet that has a massive orbit around the sun, Nibiru, and the idea that its orbit is so huge that it's only every several thousand years that it actually comes close to our Earth. Now, of course, anybody who knows anything about gravity, I've got a cup of hot English tea here. If I drop this, it's going to spill all over my jeans.
Right.
It's not just because I let it go, it's because gravity lets it drop, vertically downwards. And if you have a large planet coming close to another planet, which was Zecharia Sitchin's theory, the incredible gravitational pull of the larger planet could just wreak intense havoc all across the smaller world. And he postulated on the idea that maybe Nibiru was responsible for a lot of these ancient flood legends, polar shifts, massive calamities and disasters that were perceived as like, the wrath of God. But when you've got things like volcanoes, earthquakes, thunderous skies, landscape shifting, entire lands covered by water,
a mini ice age all of a sudden.
Yeah, mini ice age. it could be due to something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sitchin took things back even further by suggesting that before these calamities occurred, the Anunnaki came to the Earth, essentially looking to use the Earth and ultimately the people, or at the time sort of our very primitive ancestors, when they were sort of 3 to 4 foot tall, very primitive
mm-hmm.
apes,
mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking possibly hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago, and came to the Earth for its resources like gold and minerals, that kind of thing, and but then decided, or through a necessity possibly, were forced to use like an indigenous slave species. And that might make sense, in the sense that if the Anunnaki, if their world was similar enough to ours that they breathe oxygen obviously, but mm-hmm. maybe living on another planet with different temperatures, different gravitational pull, would make it tough to exert yourself. It's like if you lived constantly at the North Pole, then you're suddenly thrown into Texas. You're not going to acclimatise yourself too well.
Good luck with that.
It's kind of like a similar thing.
Yeah.
So one of the theories is that the Anunnaki decided to genetically alter one particular type of primitive human in Africa, and the stories that the Anunnaki chiefly were doing their work out of sort of Africa, the Middle East. That was where their base of operations.
I think they call it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sort of around today, sort of Iraq,
mm-hmm.
the sort of typical Middle East, areas that we all know of today, for unfortunate reasons, like Kuwait and Iran, and the story is that potentially these upgraded people, if you like, became the slave race of the Anunnaki.
Specifically to do the heavy work.
The heavy work, like mining and transportation, that kind of thing. And then over time, some of the Anunnaki actually felt that that they weren't happy about using the slave race. They actually sort of felt kind of guilty almost. And they're also, the Anunnaki was supposedly highly evolved in terms of being able to genetically mutate who knows how many number of species. And Sitchin had an interesting theory that maybe some of these stories about things like the Minotaur and the Gorgon and centaurs,
mm-hmm.
These fabulous beasts from
mm-hmm.
the Bible, from like ancient Greek lore and
all kinds of legends.
Yeah, he actually wondered if these could have been sort of freakish creations
mm-hmm.
of the Anunnaki.
Experiments.
Experiments that either went right or went wrong. Who knows how you would look at it.
Because if they wanted to experiment on these little 3-foot apes, why wouldn't they experiment on a horse or a goat or a lion or a bear or something else?
Well, the story goes from there that supposedly these upgraded humans were deliberately genetically created to be sterile. So they couldn't reproduce. But then over time, because they didn't want them populating and running wildly out of control, but from there, well, if you've only got a certain number and they're going to keep dying off, age 25 or 30 through exertion, didn't live that long back then, what are you going to do? So they decided to, change them again so they would be fertile.